Hello, and welcome to A Beginner's Guide to Samson et Dalila. Samson et Dalila, or Samson and Delilah, is an opera written by Camille Saint-Saëns, and it is sung in French and was first performed in 1877. This therefore puts it in the Romantic period of composition. This means that it is mainly characterized by long, smooth, legato lines full of high emotion and with some breaks for the ballet. Its plot is relatively simple. It is the biblical story of Samson and Delilah. So if you know that story, please stay tuned. If you are not familiar with that story, be warned, there will be spoilers in my summary. So Samson was the leader of a tribe of Israelites and a prophet of God, but his tribe of Israelites had become enslaved by the Philistines. God had given him superhuman strength on the condition that he would never cut his hair. However, he falls in love with Dalila, who is used as a spy for the Philistines and is a Philistine herself. She begs him to tell her the secret of his strength. In the Bible, she tries several times. In the opera, it's only once. But eventually, he yields and he confesses the secret of his strength lies in his unshorn hair. She then uses this to betray him, and he is handed over to the Philistines. He becomes their prisoner and an object of ridicule. However, on a grand festival, when he is being used as an object of mirth, he is led to the middle of their temple, and he calls out to God to grant him his former strength just once more, so that he can avenge his people and show the Philistines the true power of the one God. God grants him this favor, and he uses his new strength to pull down the columns to which he is bound, at which point the temple collapses, crushing everyone in it, including himself. All the information we have about Samson and Delilah comes from the Bible, which frankly doesn't give us a lot of information about them. Therefore, this opera is able to expand on their story. It explores such questions as, did Samson and Delilah know one another before the point when she is introduced in the book of Judges? Why does Delilah agree to betray Samson? Is she at all conflicted about her decision? Does she truly love him? That's what I love most about this opera. It gives a voice to Delilah too, which she had not had for centuries. There are many beautiful musical moments in this opera, and I'm going to try and describe them as coherently as I can, but quite honestly, because it is in this lush romantic style, I find it best to just listen to them and let the emotions wash over you. The first moment that grabbed me is indeed the first moment of the opera, which is the chorus singing Dieu d'Israël, or God of Israel. It opens with the basses, pulsing strings in a mournful key that start in the double basses. And then it gradually moves up through all of the higher strings to build into this crescendo of pain, thus mirroring the pain that the Israelites are in when we first meet them. And indeed, it's written in that we do not see them clearly at first, because they are hidden behind some sort of a curtain. So the first thing we hear are their voices, crying out as one at a very low note, God, God of Israel. And then they mirror exactly what the strings just did, gradually building that call and repeating it throughout the higher voice types. Progressively higher notes, the higher and lower voices overlapping while calling out to God for help, until they reach the great cry of, hear your children, hear your people, And indeed, they go through many stages of grief throughout this opening section. They remind God of his former loyalty to them. They admit their wrongdoings. They go through sadness, then anger, then blame casting and bargaining with God. Anything, if only he will deliver them from their suffering. However, when Samson first enters this scene and reminds them that God will be faithful to them, he will deliver them, if they call out to him earnestly, they respond with pessimism. It's almost as if they don't believe that God will ever hear them again. This section of Act 1 is then interrupted, just as the Israelites are starting to get a glimmer of hope, by Philistine guards taunting the Israelites, telling them to sit down, be quiet. Your God hasn't delivered you so far. Our God is therefore much more powerful. He must be better than yours. And at this, Samson takes extreme exception and urges the Israelites to rise up and fight their oppressors. His piece is therefore in a major key. It's a triumphant call to arms for the Israelites. And that is the moment when they are finally won over. And join him in a chorus that, to me, was incredibly moving. And I'm going to read from the score because the lyrics for me are what got me most about this triumphant cry. Israel, break your chains. O people, rise up. Then a line that I'm never entirely sure what it means, but it ends with, the Lord is in me. And that is what inspires them. That realization is what inspires them to rise up against the Philistines. And indeed they win. They earn their freedom, though it doesn't quite end on a major chord. There are some clashing notes in there. It's definitely a diminished chord of some sort, which makes it almost like a great cry, revving yourself up to leap into the fray of battle. I have linked 2 videos of this down below. The first is just an audio recording of the chorus of Israelites, or Dieu d'Israël, and the second is a recording of Roberto Alagna singing Oui devant sa colère, which is the great rousing call to arms at the Metropolitan Opera in 2018. The next moment that I cannot go without mentioning is later in Act 2, Dalila's major aria, Mon cœur s'ouvre à ta voix, or My Heart Opens at Your Voice, which is a beautiful piece and is often known as the mezzo's national anthem, as it is one of the most beautiful pieces ever written specifically for a mezzo-soprano. In this aria, Dalila sings of her love for Samson, trying to win him over and get him to believe her. And it is full of lush, biblical, sensual imagery. Lots of images of flowers and fruits and arrows. It's all very reminiscent of things that you would find in Psalms or the Song of Solomon. The orchestration is also very interesting. There's often a fluttering sound throughout the flutes and the high woodwinds throughout this piece, which to me mimic Dalila's inner emotions. The feelings of nervous butterflies or a stuttering heartbeat. There is building urgency in each verse, building to a climactic high G. Throughout all of this piece, however, she is definitely in control, no matter what her emotions are. And all Samson can do is respond with 2 phrases, either her name or je t'aime, I love you. The question is, however, she is in control, but is she sincere in her seduction? That decision is entirely up to you and each singer who plays the role. Down below, I have linked a clip of Elena Garancha singing with Roberto Alagna from that same Met production in 2018. There are subtitles if you click the closed captioning button. The next piece I have to mention is the opening of Act 3, which is known as Vois ma misère, hélas, or see my misery, alas. Samson has been captured and blinded by the Philistines and laid in a dungeon. And he calls out to God, mourning the pitiful state that he's in, acknowledging that he did disobey God, but did he need to be punished like this? The intro is one of my favorite things about this aria. The intro is simply 4 descending eighth notes, repeated over and over again. A, G, F, E, A, G, F, E, with an accent on each first note in that pattern, on each A, which to me mimic Samson's actions of drudgery. Usually in each production he is plodding about the stage, either pacing warily because he is newly blinded, or because the Philistines have set him to some task of drudgery, like working at some sort of grindstone, pounding rocks. And it is over this background that he is able to cry out to God. However, his cries to God are interrupted by the voices of the Israelites, again chiding Samson for giving in to temptation and landing them back in slavery. However, again, we can't see the chorus of Israelites, so they take on this unearthly quality because their voices are disembodied. They almost sound like angels admonishing him for disobeying God. I again have linked a clip of this down below from that same Met production in 2018, starring Roberto Alagna. And I could not finish without mentioning perhaps the climax of Act 3 and what might be the most well-known piece from Samson et Dalila, and that is the Bakanal. The Bakanal is a dance piece in which Philistine dancers dance in praise of Dagon, their pagan god. This is, to my knowledge, I could be wrong about this, but to my knowledge, one of the first attempts to mimic the sounds of Middle Eastern music in Western classical music, such that when you hear it, you will definitely think that you've heard it before if you haven't already heard it before, because the winding clarinets have become almost ubiquitous in recreations of Middle Eastern music. The first section of the Bakanal sounds almost like typical ballet music. There are very fluttery strings. You can imagine dancers flying about the stage to this. However, it's almost a bit too fast, so it still feels different and slightly exotic. It then breaks into that, what has become now almost stereotypical, sensual clarinet that builds and builds and builds, but then suddenly we break into a slow major key section. It's more of a slow and romantic break in the frenetic sensual action. However, it then picks up again. The tempo picks up. It becomes more and more frenetic and sensual until it builds to the climax that is its ending. It's not quite Rite of Spring level scandalous. Rite of Spring had yet to be written at this point. But I could imagine that this piece would have been pushing the boundaries of what was appropriate to be shown and to be heard on the stage at the time. As such, I have linked the Bakanal from that same 2018 Met Opera production, which I will point out is not entirely appropriate for younger viewers. No one is fully nude. They have covered themselves. However, they have covered themselves in a way such that they look as though they are nude. The production also featured a huge statue of Dagon in the middle that was able to split open to form a passageway, and inside it there were able to be what the production designer called stripper cages. No one actually strips, but they perform the same sort of function. If that particular production design and choreography doesn't really jive with your imagination, feel free to just sit back and listen to it and imagine what you think the Bakanal dance could have looked like. If you would like to check out this opera for yourself, I am of course going to recommend the Metropolitan Opera production from 2018 starring Roberto Alagna and Elena Garancia. I was lucky enough to see this production live in 2018 and it was beautiful. It captured me from beginning to end and I cannot recommend it highly enough. I loved these two when they sang together in Carmen in, I believe, 2009 or 2010, so I was thrilled to get to see them perform together again. Their dynamic is just wonderful. However, there are many other wonderful productions of this opera out there as well for you to see or to listen to. So do check it out if this has at all interested you, and let me know what you think in the comments down below. Until next time, be safe, be well, and happy listening. Bye everyone.